Hey everybody, Jim Benton here. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Chorus Daily Briefing. I'm here today with Jenn Haskell, Director of Sales Enablement at Everbridge. Jenn, good morning or good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So you're out in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Is that right?
Yes, Chelmsford is about 30 minutes north of Boston and 13 minutes south of New Hampshire.
How are you personally holding up before we jump into Everbridge?
Thank you for asking that. I'm doing all right. I
Yeah.
think I probably have never worked harder. I'm home. My husband's essential. He's a truck driver, and I'm home with a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old. So
Oh
it's
my
day
goodness.
by day. We're
And
getting
you're
it
working, oh my goodness. And nobody's helping. You're just home with two kids yourself?
I'm just home with 2 kids. You can't really get a babysitter right now, and there's no daycare. And so, yeah, we're just making it work.
Good. I mean, good for you. Your background, by the way, looks amazing.
Thank you.
And so there's so much to talk about today. Before we get into all the stats, I wanted to hear a little bit about Everbridge, and what you're doing seems amazing right now and playing a key role. Can you tell us just a bit more about it?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we're so busy right now is Everbridge provides critical event management. So what that means for us right now is it really is business as usual. The whole state of Florida, or Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh just announced a few weeks ago, and Governor Baker just announced that they chose Everbridge as their communication solution. So when things like this happen, a critical event like a pandemic, our software allows, businesses to stay connected with their employees who aren't in the office. It helps to keep people safe by sending out the right communications on what to do, what not to do, where to go. So we've been really, really
Wow.
busy.
I like how you say like a pandemic, as if it's part of your sales collateral that you just never know.
Yeah, you don't know. There's disruptions to supply chains. We help
Yeah.
with that. There's things happening in the healthcare industry every day that are now escalated because of this, and we're helping with that. So we really have our software in a lot of different verticals. At the end of the day, what we're doing, though, is we're trying to keep people safe.
Yeah, God. By the way, it's amazing just even your background. When I think about just all of us from a sales community representing companies and continuing to do our roles from our houses, looking at your background, it's just stunning. It gives you a quick sense of what you do and the power of what you do. So I love that. Your role of Director of Sales Enablement, and you've been at some of the best. You were at Brainshark, many companies that I've followed, but sales enablement is such a interesting, evolving category. You're an expert in this. I'd love to get a quick sense of what role is sales enablement playing for companies right now in this, period that we're in.
I think we're playing two different roles. So I just had I've been at Everbridge for 3 months now, literally just celebrated 3 months today. Today's the 3-month mark.
Congrats.
Had 2 orientation training classes for my sales team. The last one was a couple weeks ago, April 6th. I had 40 individuals attending that. So we're hiring, but we're also still making sure that even though we can't be in an office, they're getting an optimal onboarding experience. And I think the second thing that I'm seeing is we're starting to treat our existing sales reps almost like they're new hires again, because we want to keep them connected. So, half of that group that attended the April session were existing sales reps that looked at the agenda and said, I like that session. Can I attend as a reinforcement? And it was like, absolutely, because I want you to feel connected, not just with me, but with these new hires.
I love it. And how, in terms of coaching's evolved so much over the years. Now we've got everybody working remote. How do you think about coaching and sort of this? There's new messaging right now. Are you changing the way that you message customers, and how do you coach your reps to deliver that?
Yeah, so starting in March, we had to come out with this whole COVID-19 campaign. We released like 17 videos. We released something like 30 pieces of content for our sales reps. We really had to transition to more of a reactive learning. We like to be proactive. We didn't have the opportunity. Nobody had the opportunity to be proactive with COVID-19. But because it is so essential that we throw ourselves out there, our reps had to be ready and they had to be on message. So we did a lot more lunch and learns in the March, April timeframe than I normally would have, but it was because of just the priority and the need of the business.
Jenn, any surprises with your whole team working remote and just this period? Have you been surprised by any behavioral changes or performance changes?
I don't know if this is going to sound bad. I've actually been surprised at how everyone was able to be agile and make the pivot. I think if any of us complained about anything right now, it would be the fact that we've never worked so hard in our lives. I am surprised that people have embraced this, and I wonder what's going to happen in the corporate world after this settles down a bit, because I think people are starting to realize you don't need this brick and mortar building to do a good job. I've actually personally been, a little less stressed, even though I've been working harder, because I've eliminated this commute, and commuting in or around Boston's not easy, right?
Yeah.
So my surprise is just how much more effective and efficient our sales team is being.
It's a fascinating thing. It's something I've heard from just about everybody. I've experienced it myself. And you're right, there's an effectiveness that has raised, our data has shown it. Although there's one area of the data, Jenn, I wanted to get your perspective on, and that was on the cold calling side. So the cold calling is the area that has shown a dip. And this is, direct dials and people are working from home. It's a little more challenging to get the, we need cell phone numbers, et cetera. But the cold calls are down 35% since January. And the connect rates have held steady. So by the way, people, when you do call them, are connecting at the same levels, if not a bit higher than last week. Are you seeing similar patterns for your team as you're doing outreach? Are you doing outreach during this time?
Yeah, we're definitely doing outreach. I think the change that I'm seeing here is we're starting to embrace different ways of doing outreach and not just relying on the cold calls. So my team is really up their usage with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. We've really changed. We've had a lot of campaigns come out in the past couple of months because we're trying to generate leads and not just rely on cold calling to make those connections. So I think what you're going to see is a big shift. Not that we're going to move away from cold calling, but to your point, people aren't in the office. So the numbers that we have right now aren't allowing us to connect. And if I was a sales rep, I probably would just think that and make that assumption and not even use the number that I have, right? So I think we're going to see a big shift, and we're going to try to make those connections in a variety of ways.
What advice would you have for others? You mentioned you're trying these new things, like, not new things, but you're seeing success out of LinkedIn. Any advice for those out there that are trying to get their teams both motivated and maintaining that level of building, new opportunities and, helping solve problems?
Yeah, you still need to fill your funnel. And the best way to fill your funnel is to have an actual conversation. So don't get discouraged and don't make the assumption that, well, they're not in the office, I'm not going to get them. I think you have to go back to basics and try to find a way to connect with them on the phone. It might be making a connection through an in-mail or an email and then saying, hey, can we have a quick conversation? I don't know. We might even be seeing more opportunities to use a quick Zoom meeting to have that first connection. So I think the cadence is still important, the process and trusting it, and just doing things maybe a little differently than what sometimes people have a hard time leaving behind the behavior that they followed consistently for so long. And so I think for the past couple of months, people have kind of been like, wait, what do I do? Because I don't have access to the same process I did before. But you still need the consistency and you still need to talk to people.
Love it. How do you, we've talked about productivity being up, and a lot of us are just working really hard, but we are at home. We're sitting in our chairs a bit more. I was looking at my activity on my Apple Watch and realizing I better get moving more. How do we keep our teams motivated how do we keep it interesting? How do we keep our teams, I want to say the word fun, but I know we're in a crisis period, but how do we keep people motivated? Have you done anything unique out of the box to kind of keep the teams connected? You mentioned the training, but
yeah, so I've actually seen us do a lot of things internally, and I've seen some vendors really step up their game as far as prospecting is concerned. First, the first thing I would say is we're all human beings and we're all in the same boat right now. I mentioned this earlier to you. I have 2 dogs. I have a 6-year-old. I have a 5-year-old. I'm now working a full-time career, and I'm like a full-time elementary school teacher, right? So I think even just starting calls and remembering, like you did for me, how are you doing? How is everything? You know, and acknowledging like, hey, I've got a dog that's going to bark at 11:30 when the mailman shows up.
Yeah.
That makes us just people in the same boat. So I would say let's always start our calls with that human element. The second thing that I've seen is from a prospecting perspective, a lot of really great vendors that are like, I'm going to send you a gift card. It's a food gift card. You can choose from multiple restaurants or DoorDash. I'm not prospecting to you right now. I literally just want to try to help you and your family through this difficult time. Go get a meal on us. They might come back a month or 2 from now and they're probably prospecting, but hey, I appreciate that approach because it really helps me. And then on the fun side, you know, we do a social every Thursday. And we've just changed that to a virtual event. So to be able to dial into a Zoom, have a cocktail, talk to others, to do that on a smaller scale with your extended team, it can go a long way.
Yeah, we do a similar thing on the happy hour. It is fun, especially if someone gets the music turned on and you just start.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I
it's
tell you my favorite one? There's a company out there, you might have heard of them. They're called Lessonly.
Yes.
Lessonly is doing this thing right now where they've reached out to some of their prospects and clients. And what you do is you register. They're doing a virtual cooking event. They encourage it to be a family event. When you register for it, I think it's happening next Monday at noontime. They send you the ingredients in advance. And then you join a virtual cooking event. You make lunch with your children and your family with a world-renowned chef. We're making risotto next week, and the chef is in Italy. I mean,
no
it doesn't
way.
get better than that. It's perfect.
But it is so amazing, all the different things that are happening right now.
Yeah, and so I was thinking, I mean, that's great for prospecting, but holy cow, you could do this as a team building exercise with your team. We're starting to think about maybe setting up some lunch and learns and sending lunch to our team in advance.
It's a terrific idea. I mean, I just think that you're seeing more people. You're seeing more of people. You're seeing their homes and their kids and their kitchens now, and it just, you feel like you get to know people, especially on TV, watching the Colbert Report or the different late night people, and just seeing the way they open up their homes. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a glass half full girl. My joke is if you give me lemons, I can probably make a really good vodka lemonade. But at the end of the day, I think that something really good is going to come from this not so great situation.
I think you were managing teams back in 2008 during the recession. I remember that time as well. Were there goods that came out of that? Were there things that you did back in that crisis to manage teams that you think are learnings that people can use today?
Yeah, listen, I was part of a team back then that got cut. Half of the educational services division at Kronos was cut. They were very reactive on the fact that we were going into a recession. So not only did I have to deliver that message to some really good colleagues, but I also was on the receiving end of that. The advice that I give is when one door closes, another door opens. And I also try to think of what can you do in this time to expose yourself to something different. For me, I went back and got my master's degree when that happened. And honestly, my career has never been better from that point on. So I try to encourage people to look at it as an opportunity, whether it's corporate and going to a different role, whether it's trying a new company, or whether it's even trying to do something for yourself.
My favorite quote is similar to that, which is just the good news, bad news, who knows? You don't know what door is going to open, whether that ends up being better or not. It's up to you. But I think that's fantastic. Speaking of both empathy and messaging, as well as opening up our personal lives, when we look at the data and look at sales meetings across the board, we see that there was a massive increase in just COVID-19 mentions, 1,000%. That makes sense. It's starting to come down a bit more. And I'm curious, your thoughts about, you've got a beautiful background up and yet we have kids and things. How do we balance the empathy and opening our homes while also maintaining a level of professionalism or kind of forward motion on the business side? Any thoughts on that, on how you coach your team?
I always tell my team to lead with the people first mentality, but I also tell them to remember the value of your solution. Just because something that's going on that we have no control of, but it's impacting a lot of things that we're either responsible for or related to, doesn't mean that this devalues our solution and our product, right? We still have something, for you guys, Chorus. There's a golden lining here in the sense that coaching, being able to identify what good looks like or being able to identify gaps where further training is needed, those things are needed more than ever. So I always just say, this doesn't define the value of our solution. The value is still there and we need to be able to position it.
I love it. Well, thank you for that. Well, let me get a little bit deeper. So we're seeing in the calls a increase in customers and buyers speaking about postponement, about delay of deals. Still a fairly small percent, by the way. So the good news is it is not double digits, but it went up a little bit week over week. It's been much higher than where it was pre-COVID, 1.7%. How do you coach teams today when they're hearing the word about, hey, maybe later, talk to us after this? How do we continue to keep a good dialogue and potentially maintain forward progress, given that solutions like yours and ours and others can truly add value right now? They maybe shouldn't be delayed if possible.
Yeah, I had a post about this, I think last week on LinkedIn. And it really was a first person point of view. It was like, if you're prospecting to me right now, I'm not paying attention to you at all. But I actually did that on purpose because then I talked about what you would need to do differently. I think in general, we have to remember that our buyers are always going to assume risk regardless of what's happening. They're always going to be a little afraid to throw themselves out there because choosing a solution can make or break your career, right? If it works out right, great.
Yeah.
If not, it's going to backfire. So there's always that risk and that concern on the end of the buyers. It's just now elevated to a new level. Plus, we now, and I'm seeing this, you now have finance that automatically goes into reactive mode with things like this, and you're not getting interns, the budget's on freeze. To your point, I think the most important thing is to make sure that you understand the difference between the champion you're talking to and the other influencers and your actual economic buyer. Your economic buyer, if they see the value in your solution, if they see the potential for a return on investment, they can fight for those discretionary funds during this time. So I think even just going into a conversation and saying, listen, I understand that you have concerns right now. What are those concerns? And as a seller, how can I help you get to the right people in the organization?
Have you had to increase any of your messaging around just the value, the ROI, or sort of putting more emphasis on how finance and economic buyers can get this through right now? Or has that always been a strong suit for the way that you've presented?
No, I think it's always been something that we've presented, but I think you have to, maybe in the past we focused more on the fact that at some point you're going to hit procurement and they get comped based on getting discounts, right? Now it's not just procurement. It's more of a mentality coming from finance down, like we're on a holding freeze. So I just think that it's about getting to the right people. It's about staying present. It's about really bringing quantifiable metrics. So maybe in the past where proof points and some really good customer success stories would help you through that process, now you just have to bring some really strong actual metrics and ROI to the conversation.
Just hearing you speak, the MEDPIC or MEDIC, either acronym you want.
Yeah.
It rings so true right now, that the metrics, the identified pain, the economic buyer, the champion. I mean, this is the time when those words are meaning more than ever to get right and not to be hollow in terms of how we think about this. I love that.
Yeah.
One last area I wanted, Jen, to get your thoughts on was when we look lastly at the meetings, we've seen an increase of, reduction in force, not hiring. Even last week, it continued to go up. Still, again, fairly small, but 5.4%, and RIF, increasing. Are you, from everything you're seeing, where is your optimism in terms of how quickly things will reopen, and just what's your optimism, or what is your current thoughts on the market going forward?
I mean, like I said, I'm a half glass full kind of person. I do. It's sad to see a lot of companies out there. I actually think this is, I hope this comes off the right way. I actually think a lot of companies are using this as the catalyst to make those tough decisions, but I question if they were already having tough times prior to COVID, and COVID's kind of like the cherry on top of the sundae. But I think companies that have been really focused on growth and future proofing are going to bounce back very quickly. I know at Everbridge, we have a huge opportunity going into Q3, Q4, where a lot of companies are going to say, never again can we not have a plan moving forward. And I think as sellers, there's a lot of solutions out there where we can start having conversations where it's like, I get it. You can't talk right now in Q2. I want to stay present. I want to stay connected. But at some point, these companies are going to bounce back and say, okay, now I need a better plan for if this happens again.
Jen, I love it. Thank you so much for joining today. I think it's incredibly inspiring. I love that you have kids and dog and you're at home and you're representing the way you do right now. Appreciate that. Just thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. My biggest challenge is going to be getting back into an office and not wearing a hoodie anymore.
I was reading yesterday, more cooking and less shampoo is going on right now. And so it's
so true. Every day I'm like, my daughter has nicknamed my kitchen the J Cafe.
Love it. Incredible. Well, Jen, enjoy the weekend, and thanks so much. All right. Cheers.
Best wishes to everyone. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.